Welcome to Click for IB Biology. We continue our study of natural selection by looking at the types of selection which are in operation on the variation within the population. There's a blank version of this presentation that's linked as a PDF down into the description. Download that and annotate with your own notes as we go along. When complete, there's a quiz, there's 10 questions. You can take those to test yourself on the content presented, but then you can look at the answers to consolidate your learning. We have already described in considerable detail the sources of genetic variation within a population, and that's done by the first video in this natural selection sequence, D4.1, but also, of course, has been covered in considerable detail in those sections of the course on genetics and particularly on meiosis. So we have variation within the population, and for the purposes of this discussion, I'm invoking this diagram here, which is a distribution curve of continuous variation. So the characteristic is probably determined by a polygenic influence where there's more than one gene. There are many genes controlling a single characteristic. The frequency of that characteristic is on the y-axis here, like so, and the range of the characteristic is measured on the x-axis. So we've got these three zones identified as A, B, and C to assist in our understanding of the effect of different types of selection. And the first type of selection I should mention is where the selection in the environment favors the maintenance of the same, we have the same environmental conditions. The environment is relatively stable, so we would have a stable environment, and this would tend to eliminate the extremes of A and C, as these genotypes are showing characteristics which are less suitable to the unchanging stabilized environment. And so the median, the mode, or the mean, which is in this area here, represents the best fit. And so we would select against A and C, but promote the survival of B to create a stabilized selection. If one were measuring this, you would see this in the data that you would obtain, which show that the mean value, which of course is in this location here, so the mean value would be there for the characteristic, that this is by and large retained, but that after stabilizing selection, the standard deviation measure of the population will have narrowed. The population will show less variation. This is appropriate for stable conditions where the genotypes which are available are already suited to that particular environment, and so the population needs to maintain that genetic profile for its continuation. If we go down in this direction, an alternative type of selection is what is known as directional selection. And this is very much the case where we have a disruption of environmental conditions. So those with the disruption, the individuals occupying the center and left extreme of this distribution no longer have any selective value within that particular environment, and these individuals here are going to make the new population. These are the survivors. They have the selection and fitness advantage, so they survive, and the ones to the left do not. So these are our survivors. Through reproduction, the distribution curve that we will have shifted significantly to the right, with a new mean value in this zone here, which corresponds roughly to this position there. This will form the new population, and the characteristics of that particular population are now moving away from what we originally had in the population here. Alternatively, what we can have is selection against those individuals in the blue zone, with these medium characteristics, and that would leave us with this type of selection here. Now, this is called disruptive selection, and the consequence of disruptive selection is to create these two separate groups of individuals currently of the same species. And of course, through reproduction, they would establish their own distribution curves of characteristics, like so, through the processes of meiosis and random fertilization, and we would end up with what is looking like a bimodal distribution. Now, of course, this looks like it could significantly result in two very different, genetically very different populations. And perhaps now we're starting to move towards introducing the idea that where they are isolated from each other and do not reproductively interact, that we may be moving towards a model of speciation. But at this stage, it's actually the same species, but with two genetically diverse groups. Three types of selection are recognized: stabilizing, directional, and disruptive. Here's a link to the next video, and our subscription to the channel can be achieved in the central button there, and the full playlist for IB Biology Genetics on the right hand side. Thank you for listening.